Thank you everybody for inviting me. It's super nice that we can do this. It's a little bit sad we cannot be together in a same physical space, but I think this could work as well. So my name is, just to make a short introduction about myself. Uh, my name is Luka Cvetkovic, and I was born in Richmond, Virginia, in the United States.
You
in
put vegan butter, didn't you? You put
Uh,
vegan butter.
Okay.
Don't
And
lie.
yeah, and I grew up in Belgrade, Serbia. There I finished my graduate studies. I finished sculpture at the University of Arts, and then I moved here in Geneva to pursue my 2 years master program in contemporary art practice. And I'm interested, as Clara said, I'm mostly working now with the performance, and I'm interested in these forms of reaction um, to general political, social, or cultural state, or at least those are my starting points. And I take into consideration the position of spectator and how the spectatorship can influence the artwork and how it can shape it, and how this relation between artwork and spectatorship is actually producing a new form of understanding of an artwork. So also I chose this subject like called powerlessness and potentiality because these two concepts are somehow very intriguing for me, and they're also very beautiful. They are kind of like opposite as concepts. They stand opposite to each other. And while powerlessness go into the seemingly negative space because it represents the expectation that people's behavior cannot determine the outcomes of their actions, potentiality goes in different spaces. It opens another dialogue. It starts to appear as this position of in time and space that has a glimpse of all the possible outcomes, because it is a moment before the action is taken, and although the action is expected, still it is unknown. So that results in expectation of all the possible outcomes and all the possible positions that are yet to be taken. So if, in other words, it makes this everything as a concept possible. So if everything is possible, and if we are, for example, standing before the door that invites us to think and see every possible solution and every possible situation and every possible position and all the relation between the positions, we must assume at one moment that that door could be shut as well. So having that in mind, we could argue that both of these concepts meet at the same moment on the horizontal in the respect of the core values they acquire as premise. So they are both somehow the starting points and the limits of the space they create. And why I'm telling you this is because somewhere in my practice, I'm interested in investigating this space and investigating the dynamic formations that are created within this space. So I want to start by sharing you my screen. And just a second. Okay. Do you see? Have I managed to share the screen? Yeah? Okay, so back in 2018, with a group of curators, artists, and a lot of other guys from art field, DJs and designers and theoreticians, we formed a group called the Applause Institute. And the Applause Institute was primarily interested in a position of public in general, in public space, and the position of a general public. And the first performance that I did in this line of thinking of how to approach this issue of confronting an art in a context of the city, in some sort of real context, and opposed to this line of thought where artwork in galleries can somehow have some sort of arrogant position in which it creates its own space that doesn't have connotations with the world around it. So it was very important for me at that time to make something directly in the city space. So I started by creating a performance called Protest, and the Protest was a performance that the main idea was basically creating an impotent protest. I created this protest signs that doesn't have that with the parallels that are replacing the usual things you would put on a protest sign, like mama, right, fuck me, kill me, laughter, and this kind of stuff. And with a group of people, I went into the motion on zebras on a crossroads, and every time the light turned green, we would cross, and then we would cross again, and we would cross again. So going into this circular motion, repetitive, and so on. So basically, every time the light turned green, we would cross, meaning that we would somehow synchronize with some rhythm of the city. And what was very beautiful at that moment was nobody was expecting from like this audience who came there to just walk to the supermarket or to go meet their partners or something like that. They basically became a part of this performance. So the performance started with a group of people of like 10 or 15, and then it gained some momentum, and people were expanding the body of the performance, not even without thinking about it. And in that same by that same logic, in 2019, I would say, yeah, I was invited to do surprise performance for this birthday party. So I decided to make around 70 protest signs, and without also annunciation, gave them to the audience who came at the gallery at the show opening. And I did that without any instruction. Basically, the protest signs were with all kind of messages. For example, "fuck that," as this guy is holding, and "best porn intro ever." And this is the group of people who came. It was around 300 people at that moment, and it was interesting how to activate the audience who came into the show, but also it is always somehow, even this was not a usual gallery space, it was somehow in the streets basically, but you always somehow expect something in a gallery space. You always know, even if it's participative work, you always know how to act and how to behave. So people were holding this protest, and we made this protest for about 2 hours. But the trick is that I gave it as a sort of a gift. So basically, there was one part of the performance which happened there in gallery space, and then one secret part of the performance with everybody going after the show ended home or at the party or whatever, but throughout the context of the city, and carrying these signs. And also, after the whole performance ended, I used these photographs as a sort of documentation that was hanging in the gallery windows after the whole performance ended, or tomorrow, I brought it into the gallery. And basically, I wanted to question this idea of what does we as a collective body and individuals want from the idea of change, and what does change wants from us. And in other words, are we like a collective body that protests in hope to change something, or we are just individuals that are obsessed with an image of change, and as such deriving satisfaction just from the idea of participation. And yeah, people carried this home and they sent me photographs, and I used the photographs. I had a photograph who captured just one or two, and basically everybody sent me on Instagram these photos. That was really cool. Like they were really a part of this. So again, there was this first, it came the protest, and then there was this need to question the idea of revolution and how revolution is being perceived and how it's being performed. And this was a performance called 365 Degrees or Revolution. And it was also important that first two performances happened in the context of the city, and this somehow had a different scenography. And this scenography had this monumental, I would say, it was monumental in its unfinishedness. And it was, we didn't know that, but it was actually something that was supposed to be a museum of revolution of Yugoslav people. And I also really hated this idea that we are doing something on some very historically significant thing, as anything that belongs to Yugoslavia already has this context. But we wanted to confront the idea of revolution not just as political or sudden overthrow of political regimes, but also to question the political, the poetical and romantical aspect of revolution, because it is already known that revolution carries this romantic and often poetic feelings, and that can be highly associated with falling in love. And it is a moment of disruption of the concepts and categories through which we define reality, and it imposes new and diametrically opposite realities to the existing one. And similarly to falling in love, revolution, before it happens, it appears impossible, whereas afterward it seems inevitable. So the moment of falling in love has in common with the revolutionary moment that it can only be identified retroactively. So that was one line, and the other was, of course, to approach it also as in astronomical terms, being represented the movement of planets around the sun. And that's why Tamara Spalajkovic, the artist with whom I did this performance with, she was my reference point, my gravitational field. And I had a parachute and went in circles around her poem that she made about revolution. And it was also important to have this parachute in a sense of, in the sense of having a delimiting factor of to my movement, and to trying to somehow escape it as well, and as well as these safety qualities that parachute has. So it is in astronomical terms considered as a never-ending process of change. And at the end, there is also something within with abstract qualities, because on abstract level, what revolution wants to achieve is to produce an active relation between praxis and poiesis, or in other words, to generate an action that brings into being a new creation of life, a new creation of society, and new not in the sense of another one, nor in the sense of a new model, but a new creation, something brought into the world without referentiality. So not a reactive but active production. That was something we were interested with, and how to approach these questions and how to present revolution as a constant movement, as a constant change. And paradoxically, this event of revolution also happens in the present, but it arrives from the future and can only be confirmed as being of the past. So, for such event to take the place, a revolution needs to perform a trick, and that trick is it needs literally to create in its own time. So that was the basis premise of this performance. It was with the circular cyclic movement, and it was to create also this illusion of its own time. And this was first time the audience was invited to be a part of it. Like we invited people to witness this performance, and it was lasting as long the poem of the revolution that Tamara spoke. As long as she was speaking, I was moving. I started by moving very slow and in circles, and then faster and faster, and then the parachute opened, and it was literally almost impossible to go. And every time I would pressure myself to move faster, I would fly a little bit with it. So it was somehow helpless a little bit, and with some kind of potential as well. And just some 20 days after this performance happened, there came a performance, or better to say, a performative walk from Belgrade to Venice Biennale, and it happened with Dusan Savic as a curator, and it was done by him and myself. And the walk started on the 29th of March, and it finished at the ceremonial opening of the Serbian pavilion at the Venice Biennale on the 8th of May in 2019. And basically the main goal of the walk was to protest against the lack of transparency in the decision making of the line ministry and all the latest associates who were shaping the cultural politics of Serbia at that time. So it was a bit messy on the cultural scene. And in order to distance ourselves from passivity as well, we became this movement, hidden institutions, and the public was everybody we met along the way. I want to show you a little video we made that was basically walking in straight lines over and over again until we reach our destinations. We went through 4 countries, and sorry, yeah. So it was important for me somehow to distinguish myself from already existing discourses, and to create my own position, and to do so by becoming invisible. So there were no big interviews before, or spectacularization of our gesture and our attentions, and not to over dramatize our performance. It was very important to say just once on a little radio for 50 minutes what are we going to do, and then to start walking. And we didn't want people sitting back home watching our movement. Like, we didn't want to live stream it because it could end up being too cynical. And also this artwork wanted to open itself in the sense of who is the audience of the artwork and who is actually creating the artwork. Because our intentions were very much clear on what we want to achieve, and just to enter the pavilion and to connect these two dots of Belgrade at that moment in protests, and it's all of its trouble that it carries, and this very nice, gentle, spectacular opening of the pavilion where it would seem that nothing is happening in the cultural scene. So, but as well, yeah, the intentions were clear, but the people who we met and who we slept with and who at which places we reside during the walk, who were basically totally unknown to us before, were the one who somehow created this artwork as well. And it was a walk basically because walking it represents one of the first and foremost revolutionary movements, because it within itself it carries this ideology of resistance, and it not only represents an opposition to statics but also the actual negation of passivity. So we can say that every walk in its core value is a protest against falling and a movement away from the positions we are in, or at least expressing the need to move away from the current state of things. So to walk means never to have a fixed position, and to walk constantly means radically trying to change the circumstances of one's body over the time and over the concepts of time and space. So that idea of time and how it was performed in my previous performances, where it always went into some circular motion, I would say there was this peculiar thing in the performance where the whole concept of time changed, because our time while walking was measured by our movement and with the movement of the sun. So we became the mass that curves the space and the landscapes, and we became the time, or we basically came into the realization that everybody is always time, because it's also like known that we are the measures of time, hence we are the time as well. So it ended after 40 days, after 900 kilometers, and just by connecting these dots. And that was somehow a breaking point for me, because I somehow ended up in a situation where I I brought into awareness for myself this idea of potentiality, and not just the powerlessness as seen in previous works. And not long after that came I did this artwork called The One. It was for the show for the Photo Pub. It was a festival in Slovenia, very amazing exhibition that was curated by Natalia Pavnic, and it was called 1999, The Oracle Told Me I Would Fall in Love with the One. And it was the exhibition uses the events of the world premiere of The Matrix. I hope you all watched it. And the NATO bombing of Belgrade as intervening points, because those two events happened basically at the same day, or one day after each other. And basically the whole concept of the exhibition is to use these two events because they both carry these strong concepts, like believing in the one and one solution, and or one answer, and the clear distinction between right and wrong. And it was beautifully done, I think, in the sense of how to approach certain questions of not just war, but not to exploit the suffering and death of people, but to try to establish some new position through which we can, or a new perspective onto certain things. So in order for audience to have this little distance from that event, I would say this kind of little barricades were formed. So the audience had a look on the performance, and the performance, what it actually was, it was, yeah, it was expected but never given kiss, as a metaphor for distance between two countries and two peoples, meaning Kosovo and Serbia, at this war at Kosovo. And it was based on this idea of a touch as the most important sense because it precedes all other senses. And if you were never touched, there would be you wouldn't have an idea of yourself, and that is number one, and you wouldn't have idea of the other, meaning two, and these two concepts are basic, or you wouldn't have the idea of relations between the one and two as well. That basically means you wouldn't have idea of mathematics, and there would be no mathematics. So if there would be no mathematics, there would be no fixed positions, meaning that all possible positions are can be made and presumed or pursued, and all relations between these positions are also possible. So there is no one right and one wrong, and there is no just victims, and everybody is both victims and both heroes and both right and wrong at the same time. And it lasted for some, I would say, 15 minutes or something like that. And it was so intense not to kiss because there is this physical reflex when you come so close to somebody with this kind of motion, your brain recognizes it as some sort of immediate intention, and you somehow you're tricking your brain basically not to kiss somebody.
Would you also have curious like that moment inspiration?
Sorry?
Like,
Can you repeat, please?
could you show us how it ended?
What exactly? The previous work?
Inspiration.
The walk?
The kiss that happened.
Okay, just a second, please. So, if you're thinking about the walk, yeah, we came to Venice. We managed to enter the pavilion. Previously, we got forbidden to enter by the main guy from the shaping the cultural politics of Serbia. The main guy behind the pavilion, not the artist, but the political guys. He heard that we are coming, and he went crazy, and he forbid us to enter. And we got this news from our friends, because everybody knows everybody in Belgrade. So we got forbidden. Then Cyprus Pavilion and Ghana Pavilion and Indian Pavilion heard about it and offered us like invitations. And so we entered with the invitations from Cyprus Pavilion. I mean, I don't like to speak about that part particularly, I mean, that's something interesting because it was totally ridiculous to, of course, be completely exhausted somewhere in the middle of Slovenia in like 25th day of our walk and hear this news about some big guys being scared of two guys walking. They were thinking we are going to do uh, some radical stuff inside the performance to burn the pavilion or something like that. So after we entered and then we just immediately exit basically the pavilion because it was somehow just the last of the dots to connect. And yeah, the guy who was exhibiting, he told me, he introduced himself and told us, I know what you're doing, and what do you think about everything that's happening? And I said that I think it is really bad. I mean, it was a really stupid conversation. Like he was asking, what do you think about everything? I was like, everything is really bad, and you know it. And he was like, okay, but I really like what you're doing, and something like that. But what happened basically, I don't like to speak about this part of forbidding us because there is this, it's somehow so modernist type of thing that the work is created by some authorities or some positions that pretend to be authorities, um, somehow denies you. So in the denial, you gain actually position from which the artwork is formed. You know, like this Robert Rauschenberg erased drawing of de Kooning. So you actually use their position, and this was not something somehow about that. It was about creating our own awareness of the institution of curator and the artist, and how these two positions somehow merge during the walk, and they walk together, and they walk hand in hand, basically, and somehow we were both curators and artists as well. Yeah, somehow it was of more importance than this thing. Sorry, is that what you were asking me, or I'm totally talking about something else?
Is my mic? It's still echoing. I can't even. Sorry, I'm gonna type in the chat.
Okay. Okay. How was it dealt with legally? Did you tell at the home, at the town hall? Okay. And the question about documentation. Yeah, of course. Okay. Okay. So, Clara, it was basically, we had some kind of small announcement on the radio, but at that time my curator was he was working in the museum. He was working. Sorry. He was a curator of the Museum of Contemporary Art, and he quit his job because of what was happening. So it is somehow, I think, fair to say that, yeah, we just gave one annunciation on the radio, but it is a small, how to say, it is a small surroundings in Belgrade, and people know about what is happening. So we didn't announce it too much, but people knew about it somehow, yeah. And we didn't, I think, have to do anything legally, I think. when we came back, we were just like, I mean, basically we didn't break any rules. We just came there. People were scared just of us, I think, maybe doing something in their consideration extreme. But for me, it was more important to be like a whisper, you know? You can say some truth throughout the megaphone, and you can say I love you to somebody with 1 million of roses, or you can just like whisper or wink. And this was for me the longest whisper of some truth that we were trying to pursue or to carry, I would say. Yeah, and the question about documentation, that's something basically that for me is always challenging to do. As I always think, I always hate after everything ends and I look at the documentation, it is somehow, it was always better in person. That's something I would say I'm always challenged to do every time better, because these actions are sometimes ad hoc, I would say. And sometimes you cannot predict how is when is what going to be documented, for example, because there is like millions of possible things that can happen, I would say. Yeah. Is that okay? Is there more questions? Okay. If not, guys, ask whatever you want. I would just continue to two last things that I wanted to talk. So just like in October previous year, I was invited for a group show, and the group show was called Vistula is Burning. It was in National Gallery in Krakow, and the whole idea of the exhibition was basically this intricate relationship of human with nature and all the relations within. And so basically, I invited firefighters to serve water at the show opening, and it was somehow to do this little statement on the idea of the banality of participation in some collective ignorance that is going on, because we often perceive social, political, and ecological fires just as an image of malfunctioning systems. So the ones that are supposed to bring the fires down, we see it through that image. We see the fire through that, and this is somehow to design a small image of a system failure. And that was one part of it, but also there is something so tempting to think of how we perceive, especially in, I would say, in group shows or when there is art institutions and galleries. How do we know where art begins and where it ends? I mean, when you have paintings, you somehow know, yeah, you somehow know, like, yeah, the painting is what is art, but also like if when performance is included, then I think you have this how to say, you spectators, like, can the question is basically, can the smiles of people in the show, or like the whispers or the washing hands in the toilet after you saw a work, can it be understood also as a part of performativity? Like, where is this line? And like, is there some, does this carry in itself some invisible truth about the performance? And for like for me, it was obvious that there is this line that somehow wants to distinguish what is art and what is not art in art institutions. And in this particular event, it was kind of like the water catering guys. It is somehow, this is how you know that from this moment you're interacting with the real world and not with the art world. So I wanted somehow to play with it. I wanted to change it a little bit. And I wanted to change it by making it extremely visible. And also you have so they got these guys who usually you see they're somehow invisible, you know. Their role is just to serve you something so you can enjoy art much more, I would say. And this is what I'm saying. It's not like a critique of gallery system or whatever. I'm not interested into that, I would say. But like, it was interesting also how you have this certainty about the exhibitions, and you know that you're going to have wine or some sort of food or water, whatever. And maybe when you go to shows, you're not even certain that you will witness art or art experience, you know. And so I made this performance, Smiling Firefighters, in the sense to bring this certainty into visibility, like to play with the idea of how this certainty is performed in a gallery space in art institution. You know, you have this kind of thing that if you would, for example, you came to the exhibition, and what do you do if you like fall in love in a gallery? Do you call that small event art? Because is it art just considering it's always initiative and annunciation of something that it is art, or other things can be recognized as well? So this small gesture with making them very visible did something with that concept, pressured it a little bit. And just to finish my talk, I want to speak about this performance that I made in January 2021, so just like 2 months ago. And it was about pressuring the concepts of victory and concepts of dominance, and how victory is performed in everyday society. And it is always this question of the score. You can somehow see it so visible. There is the score as a decisive factor of who is better, and it stands as a representation of superiority of one's against the other. And it is this almost visualization of a need for a triumphant feeling. And it can be associated with the fanaticism of million supporters worldwide that are involved over something they have zero control over, as long there is some kind of association with the country, maybe, or nation they're from, or something like that. So there is no doubt that it can also represent the sublimation of nationalism and can evoke fascistic tendencies a little bit. And this type of competitiveness is not unique to sport. There is also in everyday society this kind of motion, you know. So I wanted to trigger this and to pose these questions around how victory is performed. So together with artist Lucas Ballester and Guillaume Hubert, we set up a situation in a gallery of the school where we set up like unlimited time to play a match of tennis and counting the score. So the tennis court and the referee, and the score was basically the only available structure that was keeping the thing so that it doesn't fall apart, I would say. So we agreed that the performance ends in the moment where we reach a total exhaustion over this victory of winning, when we cannot follow it anymore, and we cannot maybe when it doesn't even matter anymore. And it was the funny part is that even after like 30 sets, it still mattered to be the one who the last one who returns the ball. We really went into this motion of like totally exhausting ourselves, and then being enthusiasts about winning, and then for 2 hours maybe not think about anything, and just like playing with these positions of winner and loser, and how it changed and shifted, and having this dialogue over some net for some time. And it was important not to have audience. I think even in COVID time we could have audience because it's a big space, but we could pursue safety measure and this kind of stuff. But like, it was important not to have any external motivation to win, but just to do it for the sake of winning itself until it totally breaks and until the logic of winning under these uh, circumstances breaks. And I would say just for the end, it was paradoxical how the score got bigger and bigger and bigger and more heavier, and the numbers were piling up. And then at the same moment, it was also losing its value somehow. It was not important at the same time. It went from important and non-important, and then again. So yeah, it ended like let's just see the maybe the last. And this is just a small glimpse of a performance that I'm preparing, but I would maybe leave that for the crit if we have time, or I maybe stop talking and just enjoy listening to you guys now.